And we are live. Here
Alan,
we
it's so
go.
good to see you.
So good to see you too, Cory. We have to make this a little bit like we have to start off with not just the friendly stuff. I mean, this is supposed to be a little bit contentious, right? We're
Oh,
supposed to be, this is versus. So it
I,
can't all be puppy dogs and rainbows.
I think we're going to make it contentious, especially
All
with this
right.
topic.
Yeah. As we get into conversation. So today's topic we decided is going to, I'm looking at the list of topics. We have far more than 10 episodes of topics
I think
for
that's
this.
telling us something.
There's something broken.
Oh,
Something is broken in this relationship between engineers and recruiters. Actually, anyone looking for a job and recruiters.
it's just very broken. There's so much of it that's broken. I'm just hoping this is a start, and that's maybe some good will come out of our collisions
It's got
on
to
all
be.
these topics.
It's got to be. So we're going to remind the audience real quick. Please, please, please ask questions, comments, suggestions. If you have ideas on topics you want to hear us talk about, share those, please. But today, you and I decided we're going to talk about references. And I think the really cool thing, Cory, is that you have a perspective of being both a person who looks for work and a person who has hired people looking for work. So your perspective is invaluable to me as a recruiter to understand where you stand on references on either side of those, either side of that table.
Yes, references topic near and dear to my heart.
Good.
Um, so we can go as deeply as you like on this one.
Well, so let's start with back before you were a manager, back before you were a leader, before you ever hired anyone. Do you remember ever having an issue or being challenged by sending references to recruiters?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is the when is the appropriate time to share references. I was never comfortable sharing them out of the gate at the start of a relationship. It had to be when the conversation was serious, and that's usually after you've gone through. At least speaking for myself, after I'd gone through a certain number of rounds of interviews, and it was looking like there was some serious conversation on either side of the table. Then it was a conversation about, okay, can we talk to your references? Partly because I want to guard my references time, and also, I want to know that it's at that level before anything deeper happens conversationally. Now, of course, everybody knows references are the people that are going to tell you that you walk on water, right? So
Not
there's
always.
there's
I've got
references,
stories.
and then there's references, right? And now when I switched hats to leading people, I would be looking for the references. Um, and this is where the network effect really becomes important, because I can reach out to people that aren't on the list.
Yep. Now, so that opens up a whole different, you know, uh, bag of worms or whatever you call it. But I wanted to, so I want to go back for a second. So you would wait until you were close to the point where you felt you were going to get an offer. So whether it was through an agency recruiter like myself or through an internal corporate recruiter, you would say, let's get farther in this process. When it looks like you love me and I love you, then I'll give you references.
Yes,
Do
and it
you?
didn't have to be contingent on an impending offer, but
Okay.
I would just use my own kind of a sense of where things were. Like if you've been through, so presumably I've talked to the hiring manager, I've gone through the HR part, maybe talked the technical part if it's a technical role, spoken to the hiring manager. Um, and if things are still positive at that stage, then that's where it starts to get into the reference territory, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that was you as a candidate, you as a
Hmm.
hiring manager. Are you still waiting to that point in time? I mean, is that still how you operate with regards to references?
Generally speaking, yes, because I'm, I'm I remember what it was like to be on the other side of the aisle, and I want to respect the time of those references also. But I have a lot more, especially these days. We have a lot more tools at our disposal, so I can go myself, look up candidates on. I can look up on LinkedIn. I can see what kind of chat history they've got, what kind of posts that they make. And I actually do that. I actually go and look up the person, especially before the conversation. If you're not looking them up on LinkedIn, you're missing something, and I'm always doing that. So I definitely look into, because the culture fit for me is a big deal, and it's one of the hardest things to gauge. So I'm using the network to determine as best I can what that looks like. And that's separately from actually calling references. And I will call the references myself. I know some companies kind of do that on an HR level, but I don't place much value in that. That's more like was the person employed at your company over this period of time? That's validation. And I think a reference check should be something with a substantive conversation around it as much as possible.
Right. Okay, so I want to challenge almost every single thing you just said.
All right.
This is where we get into the fun contention part. So, me as a recruiter, I never claim, I won't claim to know what engineers do, or anyone really outside of my field does for a living, or how great they are at it. So when I interview somebody, I'm interviewing them from the perspective of, are they kind and nice and friendly? Do they want to educate me on what they do?
Mhm.
Do they speak in a way that makes me want to, ask them more and understand a little bit more about who they are and what they do? But I get to know them over the course of, let's just say it's 30 minutes to, an hour and 15 minutes that I share with them. Now, when I know my hiring manager for a year, 3 years, 9 years, as in my case, a lot of times more than 20 years, and I know this candidate for maybe 90 minutes, I'm trusting that my 90 minutes of spending time with them is going to be enough for me to put them in front of my client. If they don't provide me references, when they
Mhm.
provide me references before I put them in front of my client, then I feel like I kind of know them a little bit better. I've been able to ask qualifying questions. I've been able to ask, how do they perform in the job duties that you had them in? Where did they fall short? What are some things that maybe they're not capable of doing? All of those things added to my conversation with them give me a full scope, full understanding of who they are and what they do, at least to a degree, not a full scope, but
Mhm.
it'll fill in a greater percentage of the questions that I have. Now, I think the interesting thing about what you said is you'll wait until you're far enough in the process. Do you think at that point in time, Cory, you're only looking for good signs from the references? Like, is there some bias that you might have at that point to say, please don't tell me anything that makes me not want to hire this person because I'm this close to hiring that person and this is the final box I need to check?
Well, that's a good question. Well, first off, some of the things you just said, I don't know that it's common that every um, recruitment entity, shall we say, spends an hour and a half on the kind of questions that I'm pretty sure you would ask a candidate. I mean, you're known for asking pretty deep, probing questions, and I would expect that to happen in the interview process from my side, in addition to your conversation. So by the time it's a reference conversation, we should have had, I would think, or I would hope, some similar in-depth conversation with the candidate. And I think I can't speak for other elements of the recruiting industry, but I would hope that something of that depth and substance is also happening before they get presented. I don't know that that's true.
Right.
Realizing the demands of the industry, I have trouble thinking that's happening in each and every case. But it certainly should be happening as part of the interview process and intake process for the company. In my case, by the time it's in my hands as a hiring manager, it's probably gone through a few steps already. And if I have my plans in order, I've already worked with my team to coordinate and have a structure around the interview process that says, okay, we're going to put the candidate through this. That's the technical part, because that's a non-starter sometimes. And then we're going to go through this, and this step, and that's the soft skill culture part. And after that, then I'm starting to hear about, say, the more promising candidates. That's a common approach, to have the hiring manager kind of be not the first entry point. And then I've seen companies do it the other way, where the hiring manager is doing the initial is doing initial filter, and I've worked both ways. And there are things that I like and dislike about both of the sides of that coin. But to center on references, I still think references for me are coming after I've got enough of a scope of understanding of the person to ask more meaningful questions of the referencing. And that for me is, so I'm not calling the reference to say, okay, tell me how amazing this person is. I'm calling them to prevent myself from making a mistake.
Right.
There's the get to know you part, and then there's the what don't I know, right?
Yep.
And that's I think that's a heavy part of the reference conversation.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I think, again, where as an agency recruiter, again, I don't know. I think you're right. So to go back to what you said about a lot of companies outsourcing that or passing that off to HR or talent acquisition, saying, okay, we want to make an offer, but we got to get the references done. So can you do those for me? You know, when you push that onto somebody else, you're not doing what you just said. You're not trying to find out what I don't know because they weren't part of those conversations. So I
Correct.
think that's a big error. And that also gets to your point earlier about, am I wasting this person's time? Like if you're just having a meaningless conversation with somebody saying, did they work there? Did they show up? You know, did they perform the duties as asked? You know, and that could be a yes or no, but are they really relaying that information back all the time? Or is this somebody who's just going through motions and asking these questions that they were told to ask and then saying completed, I'm out?
Yep.
That's where it doesn't make any sense. And that's where you clearly are only talking to people who are giving good references. You know, I think where the value of references comes in is, number one, when they're speaking to somebody who is in the decision of hiring or not hiring them, you ask those more detailed, relevant, job relevant questions. And you ask the what do I not know that I need to know sorts of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also picking up on threads. Like we literally just had a reference check about 25 minutes before this call. And my recruiter reached out to me and said, okay, I don't know the client yet well enough to know, but the one thing that the reference said is don't have this person multitask because they're so singularly focused on getting one thing done that anything else that comes at them will throw them off, and it'll take an extra day and a half for them to accomplish that task.
Interesting.
That's useful information.
Absolutely.
But if anyone outside of somebody who knew that job was talking to them, we wouldn't know. That may not have been valuable, or it may not have even been noted.
Yeah, and I think that's one example where I think doing a hollow reference check is that's not effective. And yeah, your example is perfect. I mean, I've had similar conversations with references, but there's also a key point to reference conversations that I think doesn't get discussed that much, and that is, the best referral for a technical person who's working at a company comes from their friends and colleagues and former coworkers, right? So I'm also looking at a reference check to get to know the referencee, I guess, referencee,
Sure.
the person that is giving the reference. I'm getting to know them also, right? That's also a prospective candidate.
Yep, for sure.
Because once this person is hired, and if it's an ideal candidate or as ideal as it can be, and they come in and they have a good experience, they're probably talking to their references about it. So the reference actually is part of that network of potential opportunity. That's also a reason I like to talk to them. And believe it or not, I don't even always get the opportunity to talk to the references. But when I get that opportunity and ask for it, absolutely, it's a deep conversation. I'm asking for, okay, what would you say to me that you wouldn't say if it was an HR reference, right? Or what challenges, I'm going to be this person's direct manager. What advice would you have to help me coach this person to their highest potential? Right? Just really open it up. And even to your point with this person doesn't handle multitasking very well. That's not a killer.
Nope.
That's not a ender of the engagement. It just means, okay, great. That gives me a clue that maybe there's coaching that has to happen for that person. So now I know what I'm dealing with. I have some tools to bring to the fray, and that's an added piece of value for sure.
Yeah. Well, and they could ultimately, and in this case, I think they will be working for somebody who will really appreciate that. Like if I give them this task, I know it's going to be followed through on to completion, and then I give them another task. They're not going to want to throw multiple things at them. They're a large enterprise organization where
Hmm.
that's actually going to work out pretty well. And it's going to be most likely a very good environment for that candidate. So that little, piece of feedback was positive in this case. Whereas in environments where it might be a startup, where you're going to get, things are going to get thrown at you all day long from all sides, not as great, not as great.
Yeah. Very, very good point. Yeah. Yeah.
But all those sorts of things. I mean, I think that's. Oh, and I wanted to touch on something else you said. Like you don't want your references to get worn out or have all these phone calls come at them. And I hear that all the time, like all the time.
Hmm.
And I think what you said with regards to that reference could turn into a potential candidate for you. I think where my industry has failed to really help people process giving references is a good thing is that we always used to try to sell to references.
Hmm.
Like you see how good we do reference checking, and you're a manager in that environment where they're leaving. Should we replace them? I mean, do you need us to go find you another candidate? And can we put that rec on our board so that we can go fill that position? And we used to do that all the time when I first
Hmm.
started in this industry. And that was just part of our job. And now I think that's probably part of the reason why engineers or anyone in any capacity is reluctant to give references because they don't want them sold to.
That's a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
that's
agree
a
with that.
huge detriment to us that
Well,
we
plus
that we ever did that.
it's also work on the candidate. I mean, because the candidate is usually going to call the references to refresh that contact, right? They're going to say, "Hey, do you mind if I use you as a reference? Heads up that so and so might be calling you." That's fairly common to do, and so you don't want to do that 10 times a day. So that's actually happening twice, right? One from the actual recruiter or HR, and one from the person themselves. So it's there's multiple conversations to the reference going on.
Right.
Inconvenient for anybody, but yeah, I think it's a failure. Failure is a strong word. It may be a shortcoming or something can be really improved here between the HR side also and the recruiting side.
Yeah. So what do you think about in again as a leader or as a an individual contributor or somebody looking for a job, I guess, references that aren't done over the phone, references that are done through like a tool where there's a laundry list of questions that are asked, um, or an email that's sent, with maybe 5 or 6 questions, or even an open-ended email. Hey, tell me about Cory
Hmm.
versus a phone conversation. How do you feel about one versus the other?
Opinion coming. I much prefer the direct conversation, and that's for a bunch of reasons. I'd prefer a video call. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the state of talent acquisition, for example. And I mean, why does nobody introduce the hiring manager? I just can't figure it out. It's like we're caught in the web form world of 2005, and that seems to be the way that all the tooling operates. I think it's just horrendous. But I'd much rather be able to read tone. Uh, Words can be smithed. I mean, I'm good at it. You're good at it. But the way we talk just in first person and the way we think on our feet, the way we respond to cues, auditory and visual, if we're on a video conference, I think tells you something about the ability of that person to interact socially that you don't necessarily get from writing unless it's particularly egregious. So maybe I like seeing the person's writing as an illustration of communication skill, but I don't think it has as much value. At least for me, I value more the direct conversation
Right.
than I do prefabricated form-like questions. Also true on exit interviews. That's another topic we should put up there, by the way.
Sure. I'll
Yeah,
add it.
yeah,
I will add it. Yeah, because like references, if it's a exit interview versus an exit interview,
mhm,
there's a massive difference in those two things.
yeah, yeah. And I've been in that position. I know people that have where after 10 years at a company, they'll get an exit interview that's 3 radio buttons. So you have to pick one. And it's just, I think that's a big miss
Yeah.
on a lot of companies that just don't engage their former staff. And we can go on about that one for a good hour.
Yeah, and like we talked about, I mean, you and I love the book The Alliance,
Mm-hmm.
and in that it talks about having an alumni network.
Yep.
And if you're going to have an alumni network, you damn well better have a good exit interview process.
Yep. You should have an exit interview. You should have touch points. I mean, I think when you look at recruiting to some degree, but also the way the HR function works, candidates shouldn't be in application tracking should be application relationship management, CRM for candidates, for employees, because just letting them go and staying out of touch with them means you don't care about attraction and retention.
Right.
The network has now brought us all so close together. Just ignoring that just eliminates an entire channel of opportunity, just because it's hard.
Totally. Multiple channels of opportunity. Like you said, I mean, the referral network is robust with people that you take good care of. And it's the exact opposite with people that you don't.
Yep. I just had a friend of mine interview at a company, and first thing I did was look him up on LinkedIn. I said, well, I'm friends with somebody who's friends with the VP. You want me to call him? Yes or no?
Yeah.
So the network is a lot closer than we think, and not using it, I think, is a mistake. But also not connecting with it and using it to help get people into roles, also a mistake.
Yeah. Anything else on references? I don't want to, we decided we weren't going to go much over 20 minutes. We haven't gotten any questions yet, which is fine. We'll throw it out there. It'll be on our, both of our LinkedIn pages for a while, or both of our LinkedIn streams for a while, and people can look at it as they wish and want. But anything else on this topic?
Just to say, references. I love them. Let me talk to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, like anything else, you have to judge who you're giving them to. So if you're reluctant to give them to me, I haven't done my job as a recruiter. If there's something about me that makes you reluctant to send me your references, there's probably something about me that makes you not want to work with me. And that's fine. Don't make it about something else, though. Don't lean on.
Do people tell you that from time to time? Have you had that happen?
Well, I will actually point blank ask them, is there something that I did or didn't do that makes you reluctant to send me references? And I'll tell them point blank. I'll say, look, I've known you for 25 or 45 minutes or however long it's been. I've known Cory for almost 20 years. How can I reasonably send you in there with any sort of like skilled presentation with only knowing you for that period of time? The references have known you longer. The references can give me more detail, more information that will add the meat to the bone that I need to add in order to sound intelligent about you. You want that from me. You really need that from me in order to move forward in this process.
Well, I think what you just said is important. You have to set the context for the meaning of the references in the first place. And I've had enough experience with other hiring functions to say that's not always how it's done. Normally it's okay. You have to provide 3 references because of it. It's part of our process. So fill it in, which for me is the most mind-numbingly daft way to do anything.
Right.
I'm about to get started on intake again, but setting the context is super important. That's why people hesitate. So I think what you're doing is actually good. I like the way you said that.
Cool. Right on. Well, we've got a laundry list of topics that we'll cover in future episodes. I think we're going longer than 10 episodes on this, bro.
Yeah, I think we are, but I think that's a good indication. There's a lot to improve here. So I'm trying, I've recorded a video I haven't posted yet. I'm trying to look at it as there's a lot of opportunity to help people and to illuminate some just broken processes. The technology isn't the obstacle. It's the fact that we're just not looking at these things, or perhaps we just don't have the resources to address some of them. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity for things to improve. And I think that's maybe one tone this might take once we get the contentiousness, we break through that and we find a way to elevate things. I think there's a lot of room.
Totally agree. And that's why you and I want to do this. We want to improve things. We want to make things better.
Yeah.
Just naturally, we want to make things better. So hopefully this helped. Welcome comments. Bring them on. Welcome ideas and topics, suggestions, anything you guys have, please share away.
Suggestions on top flavored soda water.
Soleil soda water.
It's not beer, just to be
sponsor.
clear. It's not alcohol, it's soda water.
It's not berry beer.
Yes, correct.
Thanks again, Cory Berg.
Thank you, Alan. Beautiful mustache. I can't replicate it. I'm just going to go with scruff.
All right. Sounds good to me, man.
All right. Till next time.
Till next time.
I'll shred you next time.
Right on. Bring it.
All right.